Chapter 50, Part 1. Gregory had never imagined that the day would come when Vivian would throw him out, and no sooner had he reached Akureyri than he sent a wire to Ferdinand asking if he was going to be in the New York area in the coming weeks, because he was worried that something was wrong with Vivian. Ferdinand replied that he would not be back in the Northeast until August, but could he call Gregory somewhere? Gregory sent him the telephone number of the local branch of Glitnir Bank and waited on tenterhooks at the bank's small client office for Ferdinand's call. "It's Vivian. She has sent me away and told me that she is tired and needs a rest, but other than having a fever once or twice that I remember, she has never been tired," said Gregory, when at last the call was connected. "Oh, this sounds bad, Morgan. I had a few women who threw me out. Mostly they don't say why, but all of a sudden they get very, very vicious, and then you had better watch your back, or they will throw a hatchet in it, given half a chance. Well, all right, that last one, I think I do know what I might have done, but that doesn't help you now, does it? So she sent you away, and you went to Akureyri?" "Crazy, isn't it?" said Gregory. "It is lonely and quiet and cold, but on the other hand, it certainly isn't dark this time of year, so you could say that I picked an uplifting place as well." "Well, I define uplifting slightly differently then. How do you live up there?" wondered Ferdinand Anderson. "Carefully," Gregory admitted. "That and some innovative new supplies that I was able to procure through Wolf's connections. The days of puncturable bags packed in plywood crates, as we knew during the war, are far behind us." "Well, much as I'd love to reminisce, Morgan, this call is going to cost me a hefty penny already, and I have to head out to the airfield shortly, the airport. So how can I help you?" came Ferdinand's muffled voice from across the miles and under the ocean. "If you can stop by to see Vivian at home next month, and then tell me how she is doing, that would be a big relief. And if you can learn her reason for behaving as she has, that would be even better. She says I can come home after September, but I don't want to step into a hornet's nest when I get back. I want to see if I can fix this from here, whatever it is." Ferdinand made a sound of agreement. "That is a good idea. I don't know how much a man can repair something with a woman from over 2,500 miles away, but you might as well try. I will visit her and then call you back." Gregory spent his days sitting in the long daylight, staring out at the fjord and twisting his wedding band around his finger in an agonized sort of way. Now that he really didn't need to breathe, unless it was to speak or to pass for normal among other persons, and he was presently doing neither, he sat mostly completely motionless, like a rock at the edge of a river. He only returned to breathing when he pulled his attention back once more to meditation. But as he was emotionally very upset, it was difficult to hold the mental space free for deep contemplation, as Atta had taught him. After a bit, Gregory decided to move to an even smaller dot on the map, just up the fjord, where the view was even better, and the atmosphere even lonelier. Finally, he went all the way up to the shore along the frigid Atlantic and gazed out at the wild sea, spending as much time in meditation as he could, and moving the old Tibetan head monk's prayer beads through his fingers, repeating, "I am loved, I am loved," weakly and half-heartedly to himself, and waiting impatiently for August to come, and for Ferdinand to call back with some news. When he got a note from the bank manager that he was going to be receiving a call in a week's time, Gregory hurried back by a boat to Akureyri and awaited Ferdinand's call. "What is it? What did she say?" he asked him breathlessly, when they were at last connected. "Oh, Morgan, how you have misread her! Oh, we would have no idea about the kinds of things that are worrying her, since we live on, whereas she does not. Oh, but what a fine woman! What a paragon of selflessness! It was like the day that we sat in the presence of that holy Tibetan. You get this feeling, like your whole life has been possibly an immense selfish waste, from start to finish, in comparison to someone so holy and good." "Slow down, I'm not following you. What is going on with her?" asked Gregory. "She is planning for her eventual death," said Ferdinand simply. And that was when Gregory almost dropped the receiver. What? Croaked Gregory. "Oh, no, not like that. She is not doing anything to hasten her demise, and she looks very healthy, so I do not think anything is the matter with her today. But she is carefully putting her affairs in order, and, well, let's be frank, you are the most disordered of her affairs." "I don't understand," said Gregory. What could this mean? "She loves you and misses you terribly, but she is convinced that you need to start to become more independent and to have a life separate from hers, so that you will be able to go on when, well, when, you know." Ferdinand coughed. "And she couldn't just speak to me about this, like any other reasonable person?" asked Gregory. "I think she thought it would do no good to be subtle with you, that you would resist leaving her even for a minute unless she put her foot down. We may disagree with her methods, but what a lot of courage that took, to face something unpleasant head-on like that. That said, I do not think that what she had in mind for you was a solo, monk-like retreat for 3 months, in which you confirm every one of her suspicions that without her you are going to go back to being utterly useless. Pardon the exaggeration. Yes, now I remember how a while ago she got onto this rant about me not filing my own taxes and just generally letting Wolf and the lawyers run my affairs. I guess it was a symptom of this same underlying concern." "What do you think I should do?" Gregory asked his friend. "Well, for starters, be very forgiving and kind, because the poor woman is having a terrible time of it, giving up a portion of her finite remaining time with you in order to achieve something that she believes is important for you. Then see if you can look around up there and find something to do that could credibly paint the picture that you are resilient and life-loving and well-adjusted. If you tell her that you have just spent 3 straight months watching your tears drop into the ocean up there, it would prove her worst fears," said Ferdinand. So she is all right?" asked Gregory carefully. "I won't lie. Seeing her so upset about you, and so sad to have to be without you, well, it was hard to watch. I did not leave there dry-eyed. I really have come to respect her very, very highly. She has become a part of our lives, one of our group, and it will be terribly hard to lose her one day, to say goodbye." Ferdinand's voice trailed off. "Think how much more of a loss it will be for me to bear, who has loved her since she was 6, said Gregory, staring unseeing into the invisible depths of the dark surface of the conference table in the client office. "There is a right and a wrong way to live through what is coming, Morgan," Ferdinand told him. "I don't claim to know what to do, but your guru would know, wouldn't he?" "My guru? That man must be dead by now. We lost contact when he returned to India." Gregory replied. But a good guru is always with you in your heart, no? You could ask him there. There was a brief silence on the line. You speak wisely, Ferdinand, said Gregory. We have had so many happy years together now, she and I would not run from her now, just to avoid inevitable pain or sorrow. We must bear our longevity better, as better people, and as finer men. What are you going to do? Ferdinand asked. Gregory thought for a moment. I will go riding, he said after a bit. Your first sound idea since you flew out there, agreed Ferdinand. Next time you call her, tell her you went and that it was wonderful. I think it would make her day. You are loved, you know. Gregory gulped, thanked his friend, hung up the receiver, and stepped out into the perpetually sunlit, chilly Akureyri summer. Here it felt like some kind of riverfront Switzerland, with a scenic view of the Alps. Further out along the coast, it was a bit like a colder version of Rio, he thought, with beautiful water view, but no sunbathers. And on returning to town, he was once again surrounded by everyone around him, speaking a foreign language, although no one was playing bossa nova. As then, he had come here because his soul was in pain. Did it have to take a year of ongoing, self-inflicted anguish to get better again, or could he just will himself to stop the emotional self-harm? What would Atta say to him now? Breathe as if she was with you, as if she was inside of you, as if your breath was her breath, he told himself. We cannot turn away from our harder tasks and obligations just because they are not as sweet as the delights of happiness. Struggle, even more than just the passage of time, carves its way through our personalities and sharpens us into finer people. This is the process of holiness, and it works best when we put up the least possible resistance. Let me not be bitter that I am here, even in this faraway land, when my eyes are not blurry with tears. I can see her beauty written upon the skies and on the land and in the people around me. I see her, whether she is with me or not. Gregory's remaining time in Iceland turned out to be beautiful and magical, and his return to Pepperton was that of a conquering hero. I see through you, my practical Vivian, he thought as she threw herself into his arms with all of the passion of a besotted girl of 16. I understand now, and I will not let misdirected hurt injure us again. Calmness in all things, and let us make progress then, along this new path that you have set for us. He gave Vivian the presents that he had bought her, and he showed her the pictures he had taken in Iceland. He told her stories about the villagers he had met, and what the Icelandic horses were like. Nothing at all like Arabian horses, or horses known in the Americas or Europe. If he needed any further assurance that she was glad to have him back, all he had to do was look in her eyes and see her glowing happily at him. She looked gorgeous in a large historic gown with hoop that she had worn especially for him, her hair pulled back in the most elegant chignon that any woman had ever worn, and she was wearing the necklace of purple stones, silver beads, and now also crystals that he had once made for her. You look like a dream, beloved, and so much better than anything to be had up in that frozen north. I may be forced to wear shabby workman's underclothing these days, but I still prefer my women in the fanciest finery that my fortune can afford," he murmured, kissing her hand and then her cheek. "Why, thank you, Mr. Morgan," she said with a smile. "And I will go down on my knees when I see beauty, there's no doubt. I'm one of the devout," he recited. "Oh, that is flattering. Is it Lord Byron?" she asked. "Madame, that is Depeche Mode," he replied, with a playful twinkle in his eyes. Vivian remained strict with him and still insisted on him buying his own place, he discovered, when the topic came up again a few weeks later. "I think you need a place of your own, somewhere closer to New York City, and someplace that will be a more suitable home for you one day." He gave her a long look. "As long as I do not have to live there full time, I don't mind," he said. "Perhaps in White Plains or Armonk or in Greenwich, maybe. Will you come with me to look at houses?" "I won't pick for you, but I would love to come and help," she told him. "Well, let's go then. And about these 3 months away—" "I do think that is a good idea," said Vivian quickly. "Where else do you think you might want to go?" "Oh, I don't know. Maybe Greenland, Ushuaia, the Falkland Islands again," he began. "I am clearly sensing the cold and lonely retreat vibe, but go to happier places too, Gregory, and meet with people, and get into the flow of life, not just a solo retreat to a tundra somewhere," Vivian told him crossly. He smiled and touched her fine silver hair, but only carefully, now that it had been sprayed with lacquer for a dinner in Milford. "All right, beloved. I will see if I can expand my thinking," he told her. "And I will call Wolf about a good realtor in his neck of the woods." "I think you need a country place, but with some real upgrades, with some bells and whistles," said Vivian. "Like what? A more spacious kitchen or dining room?" he asked sarcastically. "No, perhaps something like this." She handed him a brochure. He looked at it closely. "What is this? It looks like a cryogenic freezing box or some other such futuristic thing," he said. "It is an enclosed steam shower booth," she said. "I think it involves very hot water." Is that so? That makes me far more interested," he admitted. "I thought it might," she laughed. "You know, Daniel lives with some friends in Fairfield now," she told him. "Moving south would put you closer to everybody." Gregory looked over at her. You wouldn't object to coming to visit me there, would you?" he asked cautiously. "Of course I wouldn't object," she said. "I would love to come and stay with you." He pulled her to him and kissed her forehead. "Then it is decided," he said. "Let us go and look at houses." Spring came, and they made their way south to look for a new place for him. It was quite eye-opening what was for sale in the greater Greenwich area for someone with a lot of funds. One property claimed to have a movie theater in the basement, another to have a helicopter landing pad. Gregory rolled his eyes as the realtor read them the descriptions. "You could consider the Belhaven Peninsula," suggested the realtor. "Beautiful views there. It is, of course, surrounded on 3 sides by water." "Oh, certainly not," cried Gregory, shuddering. "I wouldn't live on an island, or even a near island, ever again. I certainly wouldn't be that foolish. Do you have anything nice further inland?" The realtor raised his eyebrows and frowned. "Not on the peninsula?" "Not for all the crumpets in England," said Gregory decisively. "Very well, then. Here are some properties we could see, near Round Hill Road. Have you seen our flower sanctuary?" asked the realtor. It is very beautiful this time of year." "We haven't seen anything yet," Gregory told him. "When can we go and see some properties?" "Oh, maybe a few days," suggested the realtor. In what price range are you looking, sir?" "Oh, I don't know," said Gregory coolly. "A few million? It's flexible." The realtor took this information in quickly. A new spark came into his bespectacled eyes. "Well, on second thought, of course there might be some properties that we could perhaps visit today," he began. "Wonderful. Show us what you can today, and then we are staying in White Plains and can be reached there." He handed the realtor a business card. "Antique books and book repair, eh? Is that a lucrative industry?" asked the realtor, looking down at the card and then up at Gregory. "You wouldn't even believe how lucrative," said Gregory sarcastically. "My name is Gregory Morgan, and if I'm not at the store, I will be staying at the number written on the back there." In the next few days, they saw enough properties to make him dizzy, but Vivian was more excited than he would have imagined she would be. "Oh, how beautiful this all is! The houses and the land," she exclaimed. "Dearest, you know we could have lived here for the last 20 years or more had you wanted to," he said to her. "Don't be silly," she said, looking at him with a wry expression. "These are houses for looking at, not for living in. I had enough to do to manage my store without having also to manage a house with entourage the size of a small village." He smiled. "Well, especially for a man on his own, some of these places are downright ridiculous. It won't be easy to find something suitable." But in the end it was a garden that won them over. The house, which was near Round Hill Road, was old and needed some upgrades, but the property was beyond compare. A smooth expanse of lawn gently rolled down into a small forest behind the house, and along the sides and in the front were gardens that looked somewhat neglected, but had obviously once been carefully designed. "If I buy this, Vivi, it will take some time to do the reconstruction. Would that be all right?" "Of course it would be all right. I'm not giving you any kind of ultimatum. I just think that you should have some place of your own in the works," she told him. "You wouldn't do such a thing as intentionally stall for time, would you?" He grinned. "Why, madame, such a thought would never enter my mind," he replied. He signed on the dotted lines a mere month later, and the reconstruction work began a few months after that. He kept the designs hidden from Vivian so as to surprise her, but he spent hours poring over everything with Wolf and Dieter and getting their advice. Dieter was back in Europe again for a while, and was happy to make suggestions about the layout, while Wolf's mind already raced ahead to the interiors. "It is too bad that we no longer have our own architect," said Wolf sadly. "Karl would be quite a help now." "I am just glad that you have come to visit, Gregor, because Wolfgang and I are in the middle of a fight," Dieter told him a bit later. "Really? What about?" asked Gregory. He had never heard of the two of them really fighting about something. "About this. I stuffed it into the corner of his library and he detests it," said Dieter, pointing at a square pile of beige plastic sitting on a table. "What is it? A compactor for tin cans?" asked Gregory. "It is a personal computer, like the one I have in München," said Dieter proudly. "It has ever such a nice blue glow when the screen is on." "Yes, I can see how Wolf must love it," said Gregory sarcastically. "What is it for?" Dieter looked at Gregory as if he was slightly daft. "What is it not for?" he replied mysteriously, and Gregory could get no more out of him on the topic. "Ach ja, he sits there many nights and stares at the thing while tapping away at its typewriter-like keys, Wolf told Gregory that evening. He says he is going to use it quite soon to talk to Germany. Ha! Have you ever heard of anything stupider? He must think I am a complete fool to believe something like that. Wolf grunted, and then he wouldn't say anything more on the topic either. Gregory had to smile. Back in Pepperton, in the old, modestly scaled house that looked like it might perhaps belong to the head gardener of Gregory's new property, life resumed its normal, sweet course. Gregory and Vivian traveled down to Florida, to the Gulf, to enjoy a 2-week beach vacation, and then Gregory went to visit Daniel in Fairfield, where he was now living with roommates, working for a large company, and apparently also doing something with beige piles of plastic and glowing screens. Daniel tried to explain it to Gregory, but it was futile. "It's really amazing and powerful and so convenient and easy to use," Daniel enthused. Then he tried to show Gregory on his home device in his apartment by attempting to jab a flimsy black square sheet into a slit in the beige machine. The machine whirred and complained, refused to take the black square, and then finally it went in, only to be vomited out almost immediately with a sound that was almost identical to a belch. "You fucking piece of shit!" cursed Daniel. And that was just the warm-up round. From there, his tirade went on to include phrases so florid that Gregory had not heard anything even vaguely similar since Margaret had pulled open the door on his small Las Vegas closet filled with relief. He had fought in 3 wars and had never heard language like that. He couldn't mention it to Daniel, of course, but it was worth noting that the extreme nature of Daniel's language was such that it would not have been used in a 19th century bordello, about which Gregory knew from personal experience. In the end, he just opted for a deep frown. He wondered whether this was just an outsized fit of rage that Daniel had experienced, but it turned out that this was not that far afield from the usual lexicon of Daniel and his friends. Daniel invited Gregory to a night of billiards with him and his buddies, and as the evening wore on, everyone seemed to curse with every other word, more like a kind of verbal seasoning than a true statement of anger. Gregory did his best to look nonchalant, but drew the line when a group of giggly young girls tried to flirt with him and get him and Daniel to take them home. "That redhead is kind of cute," Daniel said to him. "Don't you think, Morgan?" "Definitely not my type," replied Gregory in a low voice. "And if she comes any closer, I will be tempted to use the pool cue in self-defense." Then someone had the fool idea of pulling out what turned out to be an instant camera and got a picture of Daniel and the redhead. The redhead laughed and flirtatiously signed her telephone number on the back of it for Daniel, or at least that was the understanding. For all anyone knew, it might have been a number for a local plumber instead. The beer flowed freely. How do I draw the line between being Daniel's college graduate friend and being his adopted grandfather? Worried Gregory.
Things could be so different now. It used to be so civilized. You will always wonder how it could have been if you'd only lied. It's too late to change events. It's time to face
Daniel gave up billiards, at which he was getting worse and worse, and sat down at the bar, where Gregory noticed that the sharp white plastic square of the instant photograph had fallen out of Daniel's sweatshirt pocket. He bent to pick it up and tucked it into his jeans. The redhead was hanging on Daniel's arm and laughing the most annoying laugh that Gregory had heard in many a year. Good God! He looked with pained tenderness at Daniel and said a quick, silent prayer that Daniel would meet somebody far more suitable for a mate than this loud hyena. It was noisy at the bar, but any moment with Daniel had to be cherished. I will only have 2 or 3 more years with you, thought Gregory, and then nothing for a long time, if ever, he thought with melancholy. We have to make the best of it. When he returned home, he discovered the photograph in his jeans pocket when he went to do the laundry. Look, dear, I saved Daniel from this leech, he told Vivian, showing her the photograph. Vivian adjusted her glasses and looked closely at the picture. What is this girl wearing? A bandana in lieu of a blouse? Can you even believe what young girls wear these days? She said in a shocked tone of voice, before dropping the photograph in the trash. Gregory couldn't help but laugh. Sure, I can believe it. Why, even in your youth, girls might have worn a revealing blouse to catch a man's eye. I believe you did it once, and it worked even back then. He grinned wickedly. It was a glorious sight that I have never forgotten. Vivian made a face. Don't even remind me. Even over half a century on, I still feel embarrassed. You threatened to thrash me, I believe. Yes, until your eyes betrayed that you wondered if that might be somehow pleasant. You must realize that I knew all along that I would not be able to keep up with your youthful appetites. It was hard to walk that line, to worship you and desire you, without being able to do about it what most any other young man would be able to do about it, he said. Well, now I am past all such desires, and all I have to say is that it is much more calm and quiet on this side of that river, said Vivian. I find it to be likewise, said Gregory. We may long for what we never had together, but look at the happiness and stability that it has afforded us. It has not been a total loss. She smiled up at him and reached her soft, delicately aged hand over to touch his. No, our time together has not been a total loss. I agree, she said tenderly, eyes sparkling agelessly in her elegant, if wrinkle-worn face. It is not that I love you more than I once did, he wrote in his journal, but that it has rather been like a refinement of love's essence within me, as if my heart has been a distillery, silently working all of this time and purifying what has been in me all along, making me better at this connection with you and making it into a great love.
Don't be afraid.
He spent his nights with eyes closed, dropping himself into the endless, vast depths of his meditation, reminding himself that his breath was both natural and the first of the supernatural experiences of the divine. And he thought about how he could be the best lover possible to her, now that so much of their story was already told. Then, when sitting motionlessly was still easily achieved, but when sitting with a focused mind began to be a challenge, he would read his spiritual books. Sometimes he read about the saints and mystics. Sometimes he read about philosophy and the virtues. And most recently, he had begun to read about science and the universe and extreme physics, especially quantum theory and particle physics. If the universe did hold the fingerprints of the Creator God, would they not be most apparent in these most nuanced of scientific discoveries? His curiosity was boundless, and he kept expanding his topics of interest. In this way, over the years, he had amassed a library of historic, Civil War, art, religious, spiritual, scientific, and esoteric books of such proportions that he had moved the needless bed out of his room in Pepperton and had filled the walls with more and more bookshelves. "That room is living proof that you need a bigger place, Gregory," Vivian told him. "You are 1 or 2 years away from having to stack books on the floor." "Not to worry, beloved. My new place will have a library big enough for all of these, but will be smaller than Wolf's, lest he get jealous," he said. Sometimes they spoke together of the things that he read in his books, and Vivian was always interested to hear his ideas and theories. They read the Epic of Gilgamesh together. "Can you believe that our oldest existing story has to do with the quest for immortality?" he asked her once they had finished reading it. "And here you have what that ancient king died seeking," she said quietly. "You have the rare thing that no one is to be able to have." Gregory shook his head. "No, you are incorrect. I have unusual longevity. I am not immortal. Those are two different things. One day, like everyone else, I will move on to the next thing that God has intended for me." "So many books later, what do you think comes after?" she asked him often. "No one knows," he would say. "Living as long as you do, does no one of your kind know?" she asked. "No, no one knows. Creatures like us are afraid of death more than is anyone else. It is part of our daily life, in a way that it no longer is for most people who buy their chicken already dead and quartered and sterilized and packaged in plastic. We have also had much longer to think about it. Who else would cling to even this kind of an existence otherwise?" He sighed. "And I often wonder what kind of a judgment it is that awaits me now, do you suppose, after such a dark existence as I have had, although I did not choose it. The Jesuits once gave me a plenty good idea of what awaits one such as me." "I don't believe in that kind of an afterlife, where people are held accountable for that which was not of their choice. And anyways, my love for you redeems you," she said loyally. "I speak up for your goodness, and I won't go to heaven without you. You are good. I believe it wholeheartedly." "And I love you for it," he told her tenderly, laying his head into her 2 palms and kissing them. "So all of these years later, what has meditation taught you?" she wanted to know. "Well, meditation is waiting in alert attention for your beloved's next word, next gesture, next sigh, he answered. You really just surrender and wait. You are like that with me, said Vivian. The goal is to be like that in all things, and especially in prayer, he said. I first learned it by being with you, though. That is true. So you have been creating the connection all this time? She asked. No, I do not create it. It arises between two, not within just one. You must be doing something as well, sending out some kind of constant signal that I can pick up, like a radio antenna. I don't think we will ever know how we do it, but it is amazing, isn't it? He said, holding both of her hands in his and looking into her eyes before carefully placing her hands onto her lap among the folds of her floor-length historic gown. As she grew older, she preferred these dresses to any other items in her wardrobe, and she looked like such a queen that Gregory could make no argument against her impeccable appearance. She might not believe that he could still look at her and be besotted with her, but it was true. The urge to worship her had never faded in him. Vivi, will you really make me leave again for 3 months next year? He asked her as December began. She nodded somberly. The way you make me come and go, I feel like Adonis being time-shared by those goddesses, or like a schoolboy being sent away constantly to live at school, he complained. I hate leaving you. We cannot always have what we want, Vivian sighed. You are so wise and so strong, Vivi. I am just a poor and weak man. I will work hard to get better and better at it, but it is hard. He kissed her. All right, then, at least let me travel in the first 3 months of the year, so that I am back with you by spring. Like Persephone, she said. Yes, like Persephone. I will accompany my friends to Europe in January, and then we'll spend February somewhere in retreat as I would like to do, and March I will see if I can find something useful to do stateside again, probably hanging around Greenwich and seeing how the new place comes together. How does that sound? She smiled. Like a well-balanced 3 months of living, she said, and I will be happy to have you back when you return. And if I happen to have something important to tell you, and it isn't yet Wednesday, he asked. Then call me twice. It is all right. I think you understand the overall point by now, she said. Yes, I believe I do. I want to be a man you can be proud of, Vivi, and you should never have to worry about me. Wait until you see this new house when it is done. It will knock your socks off, he grinned. You know you will have to pay property tax on that thing, she said smartly. Oh, the taxes! Must you remind me, woman? He asked in pretend despair. Daniel came up for a weekend with his grandmother, a tradition that he was happy to continue even now that he was in his 20s. I feel like this is my real childhood home, he confided to Gregory. You've never really explained what was going on at your parents' house all these years, said Gregory. Well, my mother and my father had a falling out a few years back, when it turned out that my father, had someone else on the side for a while. I guess I don't blame him because my mother was kind of awful to him for a long time. Anyways, they both blamed each other for being a poor example to me, and they pointed out to me constantly all of the ways in which I had turned out to be a disappointment. I figured it was best to get out of there, every chance I got, Daniel told him. Gregory felt his heart ache for Sophie. I had no idea that this is what it was like, with affairs and things going on. No matter what a woman may be like, She does not deserve something like that." Daniel gave him a look. "You have obviously never really met my mother," he said. "Oh, young man, if you only knew how well I knew your mother once," thought Gregory to himself. "We were the closest of playmates and friends." "She was an angry dragon for a while, but now she looks much better. She paints and draws. She's really good at it. It's funny, but I think it took her pretty much their entire marriage to finally take my dad seriously. And now they actually talk together. I used to think she had just married him for his money." "She wouldn't have been so shallow," Gregory said, feeling compelled to come to her defense. "Who knows? I know that she and Grandma have argued for years about why she married my dad, as if it was even relevant after 30 years or whatever," sighed Daniel. "People can be so stupid about stuff." "Well, that is a great truth that you have just said," agreed Gregory. "But here's something new. I have a new Depeche Mode album. It is even better than the last one. It is called Violator." Daniel dug around in his bag and pulled out a slim square plastic container. "I got it on CD. The sound quality will blow your mind." "I can't wait," said Gregory. "Here, use my Discman," said Daniel. "Maybe you can put it in for me and get it to the best song on there?" asked Gregory uncertainly. "There is no best song. Every single song is amazing," cried Daniel with enthusiasm. All right, laughed Gregory. "I get the picture. Show me again how you work this thing. You know, I have never been able to part with vinyl." "That must be what comes of being a history student," Daniel told him. Daniel was right, of course. The album was amazing. It yielded itself up readily to repeat listening, and soon Gregory knew each word by heart. The Phantom of the Opera, if he was unchanging, was certainly sitting around somewhere now and listening to this, thought Gregory with a smile. "I feel like it is kind of upbeat at times," said Daniel. "You know, like Enjoy the Silence. There's a happy song about how it just can't get any better than that." Yes?" asked Gregory. "How sad is a happiness that is so fragile that a single word could crush it? And without words, how do we really connect with others? And if we do not connect with them, how do we know if they are even really there and sharing our happiness with us? Without words, we can never know." "With words, you might not either," Daniel pointed out. "True," admitted Gregory. "Then it is back to my eternal plan B, which is to only trust my feelings." He smiled. "I think you and they are saying the same thing," said Daniel, and then they both smiled at each other. Later, Gregory tried to explain the music's appeal to Vivian. "Ignore the loud guitars and drums. There is real tenderness here, and an angelic, childlike, open heart, the way that we all were in heaven before this life. But you cannot go through this life like this, in this sensitive and angelic way. Life toughens and breaks you, and the more sensitive you are to begin with, the more it hurts," said Gregory. "My last optimistic moment was when I was 17 and put on that stolen Confederate uniform and walked down to the train station. Sooner or later, all of us lose this holy love of the angels." "Until we find it again," Vivian told him, putting her arms about his shoulders. "Yes," he said simply. Gregory decided to take his next solo trip to London, where he arranged an extended stay for himself at the Savoy Hotel. "Do I have to go?" he complained to Vivian, realizing as he said it that to complain about having to stay at the Savoy was truly pathetic. "Remember what you used to tell me," she said, moving close to him and brushing her fingers against his cheek. "You never really leave. How could you, after all?" "Where else would I go?" he said softly. She was right, as she always was. It ended up being a good trip, and it balanced out his last voyage as well as his following one to Greenland. When I am away from her, loneliness and luxury are my hallmarks, he thought. Where can I go to find both of those at once? The work on Gregory's house took almost 2 years to fully complete, and the gardens took even longer. Vivian became convinced that he was stalling for time, and he would not let her come down and see the progress of things, so he had to rely on Wolf and Dita and Ferdinand to back up the facts with her. At last, the time came to go about the decoration of the house, and Wolf closed his book repair store for a solid month to take the time to drag Gregory up and down Boston, Connecticut, and New York looking for furnishings and fabrics. "Do you recall how we once decorated an entire apartment together for Frau Vivian and her daughter?" "That was one of our finest deeds," Gregory agreed. "She still has the sofa pillows and most of the dishes and the plant stand and other items from that time." "You have been so kind and generous with Frau Vivian and all of her family," said Wolf. "That is why so many blessings have come to you now. Goodness is repaid with happiness." "You have been kind and generous with me also, Wolf," said Gregory. "This is our 6th decorating project together, or is it the 7th or 8th? Wolf waved dismissively with his hand. "Who is counting favors between friends?" he said. Dita returned from Germany and also took an active hand in decorating Gregory's new house by convincing Gregory to get some new art at auction from Sotheby's in New York. "Why is this framed junk so expensive? Sotheby's should give us a discount," muttered Wolf. "That company was built by our kind, and on our wallets." "How do you mean?" asked Gregory. "Well, who do you think buys most of those things? Who pays astronomical prices for what sometimes is just old junk? Why, natürlich, the very rich and the hopelessly nostalgic. In other words, us." "Ah, you mean the same kind of customers who buy up the most expensive and the rarest of old books?" Gregory asked with a knowing smile. "And what about fine carpets?" "Yes, Wolfgang, you know he is right. Gregor, your sharp wit is always on target," laughed Dieter. "Your new house is going to be jaw-dropping, Gregor," Wolf told him. "I sure hope so," said Gregory. "I have a woman whom I am desperately trying to impress." That made everyone smile.